All right, so welcome everyone. Glad to be your host again for a super interesting event. I think there will still be people joining, but that's okay. We're gonna kick it off. We don't want to keep Ken too long waiting. His time is very precious, and everyone's time is precious actually. So thank you for coming. I will, before I kick it off, I will just want to know who is in the room for both me and Ken to get an idea, and we can adjust some of the things we want to say. So I will paste in chat a Menti link. You just have to go there, and there's just two questions, so it will take, I don't know, just 1 minute to fill it in or so. So I will just be on the other side checking the number of people who answer, and then I will so you should have it open. If it doesn't work, let me know. Okay, and I can even share the statistics, so you can see. I think you can see it. It's a pretty normal distribution, I should say, right? Um, of the people in the room. It's only 15 responses. I think we're a few more. Um, yeah, so waiting for the next one. I'll just start it now, but just making sure that everyone was able to answer this. But anyhow, we have enough. So just a second. I'll just kick off the next question. So I think now it should be available. Let's see, who do we have here with us? Sorry. What's going on? Oh, here it is. All right, so product managers, UX designers, or designers in general, business part. All right, so I'm going to leave this for a second up there, and I'll just do a quick intro to the session, and then I'll pass it on to Ken. So you can see my name there. I'm the initiator of the design thinking community. Basically, this community its role is to facilitate the connections and the content for people who are interested or are learning or educating themselves on design thinking in particular, and maybe on design in general, but it's more on the mentality of how someone thinks through a design project. And as of last year, I considered it important to sort of bridge the gap between the product managers communities and the design thinking topic, because it's something that in most parts, I mean, in many places, it's important for product managers to be able to integrate that type of mentality and mindset in their work, and maybe with the teams that they work, so inspire them as well. And that's what Ken is going to talk about. And we've been around, what, 6 years or something like that as a community, quite a lot of people. And I think we're losing traction on the virtual meetups from what I see now. But we're recording this, so we'll make it available to everyone. Thanks to Ken for allowing that. And I think if there's no other question, I will just host. So my role tonight is going to be to assist Ken in his interaction with you. That means that whenever you have questions, please drop them in chat, and I will make sure to sort of moderate and curate the questions and feed them to Ken. You can drop the questions at any time during his presentation. If I consider there's something that's really important for that moment, I will stop Ken and ask him to respond. If not, I will leave it for the end, and we can take a Q&A after his introduction with the content. So that's it. If there's no other question from you or burning issue, I will just pass it on to Ken.
Thanks very much. I'm really excited to be here. I love joining these meetups right around the world. Right now, I'm in San Francisco in California. It's just gone on 8:50 in the morning. So great way to start the day with interacting with a lot of fantastic professionals. I have been working in the Bay Area for about 25 years as a product leader. I've worked for startup companies, for maturing companies that are trying to break into kind of new innovative areas. I've worked on consumer, enterprise platform products, large and small, VC funded or companies that are Fortune 500. So I've had the pleasure of being able to kind of meet and see hundreds of different types of problems being solved by product professionals everywhere. And so I'm very passionate about kind of spreading the word. A little bit more about me. I am actually Australian, so I'm a bit of an import to California, and come from Melbourne. So one of the things I love to do is to reach out internationally. I love to travel. I love to obviously that's been very virtual for recently, but it's really great to see you all. And on that note, because I would love to try to make this kind of a little bit interactive, particularly given that we actually have a really nice sized group here. So I'd like to try to make sure that it's interactive, asking questions, and we'll do a couple of exercises together. If you wouldn't mind, I'd really appreciate it if everyone could turn on their cameras. It's a lot easier, believe me, for someone on my end to be able to see you and to be able to interact with you, see who's speaking, and we go from there. And I promise you that we'll keep it pretty light. As Drago said, do not hesitate to drop questions, and I'm more than happy to stop. We've got plenty of time, so I'm more than happy to stop, answer questions as we go. If you've got any even stories to add to the content, that'd be fantastic as well. So I will kick off and talk a little bit about what we're going to do. All right. Now, one thing I neglected to mention is that I'm author of The Influential Product Manager, which came out early 2020. And it really is focused on a very practical guide for product managers everywhere to be more influential in their role. So it tackles some of the soft skills and the stakeholder management challenges, as well as showing kind of how to actually work in a very collaborative way with your team to deliver products. This is definitely coming from many years of experience, as well as a ton of research that I've done. I also neglected to mention that I teach product management at UC Berkeley, which is one of the leading Bay Area institutions. And it's been my pleasure to do that for 8 years. So a lot of what we're talking about today is actually coming from real industry research, really thinking about like how to how to do design thinking in a very practical, less labor-intensive sense, and how to actually do that sort of across many, many different types of products. So there we go. So today we're actually going to talk about like 5 key questions required to define your customer. We'll talk a little bit about these key questions, about defining their needs and being able to understand and empathize more with your customer, more effectively with your customer. There's a couple of key techniques, which I'm sure many of you are actually familiar with, but we'll talk about like the importance of value propositions, personas, customer journeys to sort of aid your understanding of your customer. And time permitting, we'll talk a little bit about kind of what happens at the tail end of that double diamond in terms of validation, and some things that I would like to see product managers in particular do more. So I think the design folks in the group today will hopefully agree with me, collaborating more with your design counterparts to get more deeply involved with the validation process is hugely valuable for product managers to understand more about their customers. So we're all, I think, familiar with this double diamond, but for those who are not, I just wanted to anchor us about where we're going to be talking today. Now, the way to think about this is you're engaging in divergent, then convergent, then divergent, then convergent thinking. That's basically the underlying principle of what design thinking is about. And by going through these 5 steps, you can do that in a very disciplined way, so you're able to ensure that you're understanding enough about your customer before you actually jump into building something, which is the biggest mistake that product managers in particular still make, is jumping straight into starting to create their solution, often because there's a lot of stakeholder pressure, there's a lot of tension, maybe some urgency, maybe there's some competitive or marketed needs, or maybe customers are asking for very specific things. And so what I aim to do is to sort of propose to you that by using design thinking even in a very quick sense, talking about it even on the space of days rather than kind of even months, by being more disciplined, we can understand more about the problem we're solving before we actually get into it. Now, today we're going to be talking about the second stage here, which is really about as you've built empathy with your customer, really driving an understanding and defining who they are and what their problems are, and what they do today to actually solve those problems. And then, time permitting, we'll talk a little bit more about the prototyping and test stage. Another way of putting it, if you think about like new product development, and this is why spending time in the discover and definition phases is so critical. If you think about what each of those steps actually do, in the early stage, you're kind of defining and discovering opportunities. And you're trying to empathize with the customer, understand their need, evaluate a market opportunity perhaps, and then really understanding the problem that you're trying to solve. And the reality is that we've spent so much of our professional lives at this end of the scale, which is where we're trying to build the product right. We spend a lot of time with engineers and designers trying to make sure that we've got a solution that can be built. We worry a lot, as we should, about the development cycle and kind of working with agile or other methodologies to get to a point where we can deliver a product. But we kind of forget that that's actually not where we add the greatest value. The greatest value actually occurs at the beginning. This is where we're making sure we're building the right product. Very different from building the product right is ensuring that anything that we're going to be building is going to be solving an unmet need and be highly valuable. Now, if you want something that's easy to pin up on your wall to say, what is it that we're trying to do? It's this. It's really about staying longer in problem mode before jumping into that solution mode. And I actually like to encourage teams to start using that language deliberately and say, wait, we shouldn't be talking about solutions yet. It's very natural. We're very solution oriented. We like to solve problems. We have lots of stakeholders who think they know exactly what solution that they want us to build. And it's very easy to slip into solution mode. So always say, stop. We don't know the problem deeply enough yet. We've got to spend some more time before understanding that before we actually start executing. All right. So first sort of exercise I'd like you to think about, and feel free to drop your thoughts into chat. Can you, for your product, or if you don't own a product, it can be either a product you've worked on or one of your favorite products. Can you actually describe your target customer in as few words as possible? And by that, I don't mean writing down just like everybody. I mean, like, can you describe a target customer that is sufficiently defined? Please go ahead and add that into chat right now. Doesn't matter what product it is. Don't be shy. Christian says car makers. Razvan, you said you got 2 types of customer. That's excellent. Who are the 2 types? And if the chat window is too cumbersome, feel free to go off mute and say it. Corina, gamblers, interesting. Cosmin, investors. Christian, migrants, interesting. Interested to see what these products are. So a couple of thoughts. So Razvan, when you say you've got 2 types of customers, can you just explain a little bit about like what kind of product that is and why? You can go off mute.
Yeah, hi. Oh, it makes it easier to speak. Yeah, so it's a platform for exchanging verifiable career and educational information. So obviously, it has a B2C focus, which is on students, and also a B2B focus, which is on training providers and recruiters.
Got it. So you kind of have a marketplace, is that right?
It's not actually a marketplace, but more like a platform for issuing, for example, digital credentials, digital diplomas or certificates. So,
got it.
Yeah, here were the training providers, and then the holders of those digital credentials or digital certificates are the students.
Excellent. Got it. Thanks for that. So, Christian, you say you've got that your target market or your target customer is car makers, and when I think about a target customer, I like to think in terms of people, because I think it actually helps with empathy. When you say that's your target customer, is there a way of personifying car makers? Is there a specific buyer or decision maker within car makers that you're actually appealing to?
I'm working with car makers as a client. It's indeed hard to apply the original meaning of design thinking, but I consider them as users that have some needs. Although we are working with systems, we do refine the requirements based on in a way people's need, right?
Who do you talk to when you refine those requirements?
Not to a user of a car, that's correct. I'm discussing with an engineer usually.
Right. Okay. So as a second part of this exercise, can everybody write down another customer or user type of the same product or an influencer within that product that maybe your company doesn't pay enough attention to? And the point I'm wanting to make here is that we more often than not have multiple customer segments that we or types that actually need to be served as well. In enterprise, think about like not just the economic buyer, but you also have your end user, and it's very easy to overlook them. And in the marketplace, you'll obviously have two sides of the market and needing to be figuring out two separate kind of what problems are you solving for both sides of the market are important. So for everyone who has written one of their target customers, can you think of another? Relusa, like teachers, staff, and admin workers. Excellent. So Dragos is both bold, transformational leaders and middle managers who are looking to take risks with their team. Any others with two customers? Karina, you said that your target market are gamblers. Is there another?
Well, I'm thinking about it because it's about an online casino, which is accessible only for the Belgian market. It's 777.be.
Oh, yes.
And these are people who like to entertain themselves by either playing online casino games or betting. So
who buys your product?
For instance, for casino, anybody who has a national registration number from Belgium
can play.
Who is 18 plus, yeah. But for betting part, you don't necessarily need to be 18 plus, so you can be of a lower age.
Do you offer that independently, or do you partner with other companies to offer that?
Well, we drive people to come to our websites. We don't rely only on people who are visiting. So we definitely have an SEO team who is driving, who is providing, let's say, the word is not coming right now to me.
Okay, that's okay.
Traffic to our website. That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another one that I'm noticing, Christian, you say that you've got your target market is migrants. What is your product, and do you actually have more than one customer that you should be serving?
Hi, yes, good day, everyone. So I'm working with migrants, and the goal is to help them find jobs. So like a job or jobs platform linking migrants and firms that need migrant labor.
Right.
Now, my context is, I think, maybe a bit different, because where I am, I'm in an English-speaking country in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, and there have been lots of Venezuelan migrants who come to our shores, and a huge issue for them is, number one, finding jobs, but in order for them to find jobs, they also need to be able to speak English. So in some sense, I'm trying to do both, help learn English and also help to connect them with jobs.
Great.
So that's what we're working on.
So I'm seeing potentially that you have many different types of customer types there. So you've got the migrants, but you've also potentially got influences like the government bodies. You've got the firms that you need to be able to like find positions with.
Yes.
You may actually have like English schools that need to get involved. So these are all, what I'm trying to illustrate here for everyone is that we often think about our target market a little bit too narrowly, that actually there's a whole ecosystem around each of our products. And each one of those players needs some kind of compelling reason to participate with your product. Often it's often economic, but not always economic. And we need to be able to define what problems we're actually solving for them as well as say our target customer. And so I propose that as part of design thinking is that you're always thinking about like, who are the different users, customers, players in my ecosystem? And have I really deeply understood all of those to a level that I can actually talk about solving their problems as well, and ultimately have value propositions for them? So that's really the very, very first question you have to ask yourself. It's not as obvious as I think we think it is. For a start, there are people making decisions, not companies. So we might think about our target market in the terms of the companies we sell to, but ultimately we're selling to people. And those people have different needs personally, economically, emotionally, that we need to take into account about how we're actually addressing their needs. So first question you ask is, for whom are we solving a problem? And you're likely to have multiple complementary customers and users that you need to be thinking about. Secondly, sub-segmenting those target customers and defining attributes at a deeper level is absolutely critical. So going, for example, Relusa, you've got teachers as one of your target customers. But my bet is that there's multiple segments within the teachers. Some who are maybe early adopters, who love technology, others that are probably fearful of technology, some that are trying to solve problems in the classrooms, and maybe some that are actually more sort of maybe more seen like principals, for example, that they might even have motivations that are at odds with teachers, like, you know, and very, very different needs. Teachers might be wanting tools. I don't know your product, but teachers might be wanting tools to help them be the hero in the classroom, whereas the principals and administrators might be actually wanting data on how each teacher is actually doing, which you may actually be fearful for the teacher. So we need to really think about all of the different target customers and keep on segmenting them until we believe that we've got a deeper understanding of who they are. And of course, personas are a very powerful way to build empathy. When you actually develop a persona, you've got that next level of detail, so you can kind of see each of your targets as a person with emotional and also other more rational, if you will, objectives. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, when I was working at Masterclass, we actually had 4 different types of learners that we identified within our platform. Some were very much about diving into a specific category. They wanted to learn everything there was about cooking. They didn't really have any interest in going outside of that category, and they'd often look and practice any of the learning that we were doing. The kinds of content that we had to produce for, say, the Tina on this page is very different from the Paddy, who is a lifelong learner who wants to dabble in a lot of everything. They don't tend to do any of the practical exercises. They like to sort of like use the learning more into sort of like finding inspiration and enjoyment. And then you might even have like the Ethans of the world on this page that are more about like career development, and they're wanting practical things that they can actually apply. Totally different types of content, totally different types of learners. And as it was, Masterclass actually serves 2 of those pretty well and doesn't do a great job for those, for example, that are looking for career advice. And it took us some time to actually understand why we had such different behaviors on the platform. We had some that would be recreate, like watching, stopping, coming back, watching the same thing. Others that would tend to sort of go across very, very different categories, learning at one moment from, say, Steph Curry, that is a basketballer, and then next moment they're learning from Chris Hadford, and an astronaut. What sort of, very, very strange patterns. But by understanding what they were trying to get out of it, we're able to empathize and build better solutions. Now, I'm not expecting you to internalize this page. It's a bit of an eye chart, but if you want a persona template, I have a bunch of resources that I've put together at influentialpm.com. The URL's in the corner there. And I've also invited Dragos to send out these slides after today, so you can have a copy of them. But if you're wanting to sort of have a quick and dirty way of putting together your personas and challenge yourself to understand and define, do I really know my customers as people? This one pager can actually really help you. As I said, I'm all about practical, easy techniques. We're all very, very busy people. So turn around and do this quickly. The worst that you can do is form a deeper hypothesis and a better understanding of who they are. And then you can always iterate and test on them. Okay, moving along. The second sounds kind of obvious, right? What problem are you solving for your customer? But I often find that product leaders and product managers kind of confuse their solution with the problem that they're solving in a particular way. I often hear talk of features, of things that we're building, and not of the actual benefits that we're actually trying to deliver to the customer, the promise that we're making in their terms. And so it's important to explain precisely what is the pain point or unrealized opportunity that your target customer is experiencing today. Obviously, you want to back that up with data, and then be clear about what you are actually going to deliver. So that, again, starting with a meaningful problem statement, making it incredibly important that you pinpoint what are they actually faced with in terms of challenges. I'm going to just point out an example. This is you've probably seen Maslow hierarchy of needs. Not every product has to solve a utility purpose. Doesn't actually have to have a utility purpose. It can actually solve almost at any level of the Maslow hierarchy of needs here, from psychological needs. So, for example, I'm just going to go. Christian is solving problems for migrants. These are probably at that lower levels, the safety and security levels, health, employment, property, family, social stability. That's a very, very meaningful need. But others like Karina, who's solving for gamblers, might be more of enjoyment. So this might be more like self-actualization, like spontaneity, experience. And then others, again, might be solving for self-esteem, building out confidence, achievement, respect. So thinking about where your product kind of fits in on this, and then being able to pinpoint both not just utility, but what are some of the pains that we're actually thinking about. Now, in a more enterprise setting, you might be thinking about solving economic problems, like something that's going to mean that you can actually either generate revenues or reduce cost. But there are other motivators in an enterprise setting as well. Things like being inefficient, unreliable, low quality. It's inconvenient, it's inconsistent, it's risky. That's actually a big motivator for many decision makers in the enterprise space. Even if your product is potentially going to save them a lot of money, if they're taking a risk on you and they might, say, get fired over that decision, you might have a much, much harder time to actually convince them. And then they're obviously not going to actually go with you. Now, another question you must ask yourself as a product leader is, am I actually solving something that's simply a want, like a painkiller, something that is going to be am I simply solving something that's a desire? Unfortunately, desires or wants don't actually make great problems to solve. They don't tend to, they've got very low opportunity to actually generate a business out of. They generally are less compelling. They might only find a niche audience, but it may not translate into success in the mainstream. So a need is something that's actually an unmet need without a current solution or a significant pain point that exists with current solutions. So making sure that whatever you're solving is going to be extremely compelling and not something that's going to kind of peter out simply because there's a little bit of desirability. Can anyone think of a product in the world that solves a want? In other words, it's not actually really that compelling and is likely not to, perhaps you wouldn't pay for it. Maybe it's not something that is necessarily going to be around for very long. Any ideas? Most fashion products? Yes, fast fashion tends to come and go very, very quickly. iPhone, I think, is solving a pretty powerful need across probably most of these levels of the Maslow. But Judy, you mentioned the fashion products. They do actually solve problems around self-esteem and even self-actualization, certainly self-expression. But you're right that any individual like fashion trends can come and go pretty quickly. Excellent. So just have a bit of reflection. I like to use this tool and say, what am I actually solving for? And let me not overlook some of the more less utility, more emotional, more subjective categories. They are not less important just because they might be more about like solving emotional needs for people. Okay, back. I like to work in threes. I think it seems to be just something that helps people process a little bit easier. That 3 value propositions per target customer. So if you've got 2 to 3 customers, you want to make sure that you've defined value propositions for each. For example, if you've got in the case of Ravan, you have B2C students and B2B training providers and recruiters. You'll likely have very different value propositions that you've defined for each of those target audiences. And I like 3 because 3 tends to be enough to like process and understand, and it doesn't hang all of your chances on one of those. If one of those is wrong, you still have plenty of compelling value propositions. I'll show you a couple of examples. But importantly, remember that value propositions are the reasons people buy. Your features and functionality make it possible. Do not slip into, when you're talking about problems that you're solving, to suddenly talking about all your features, functionalities, technologies. That is a mistake, because it's basically that's your solution to somebody's problem. What's the benefits of that solution? And that takes some training to spot it and realize that you're doing it, because we all like to talk in terms of the features and functionalities we're delivering, but it's much more powerful to say, we're solving this problem and here's the value proposition or the benefit that we're going to derive from this. I'll show you a couple of techniques very quickly to sort of break out of that. Before we go any further, you may or may not be familiar with Masterclass. It was a company that I was head of product for. And just to illustrate how a problem that you're solving is not always really obvious. Now, Masterclass is an education technology product. Given these testimonials, what problem does Masterclass actually solve? And I'll give you a hint, it's not educating people. Feel free to go off mute, yell it out, drop it into chat. Tutor, good. Inspiring them, inspiring our users. Yep, that's pretty good. Specifically around what? What are they getting inspired to do? Empowering creativity. That's from Georgiana. Sorry, I'm messing up your names today, aren't I? Georgiana, empowering creativity.
Georgiana, yes.
Yeah.
Georgiana, it's like George and Anna.
Okay, that's better. Yeah, Georgiana. I love what you said, empowering creativity. What jumped out at you there? Why did you decide that was it? Because it's correct.
It's like a few keywords around creativity, right? So just, I don't know, freedom and discipline that comes together with creativity, I think. And I don't know,
Yeah.
instead of just following recipes, you get to create rather than, yeah.
Absolutely. So the problem that Masterclass is actually solving is this inspiration or permission to be creative. It's giving a sense for the viewer that you can do this too, because they're getting an opportunity to sort of see how the best in their fields have had the same challenges that they face. They've doubted themselves. They've had to develop their own techniques. They've had to figure out how to actually be successful. And as a result, the viewers of Masterclass have an opportunity to kind of get that insider view and realize that they're actually really no different. And some of the most compelling lessons within Masterclass are moments of vulnerability when you have some of the leading actors or writers or photographers talking about moments where they were challenged or maybe even failing and what they did about it. And it gives people a real sense like, you know what, I can do this too. And so inspiration is actually what Masterclass is selling, not education. It's not always obvious. So think very carefully about what your products are actually solving for. It's not always transactional. Great. Let's have a look at some value propositions. So of these value props, of this list of things, which of these are actually value propositions, benefits that your product is actually selling? When you spot it, yell it out. Or drop it into chat. Anything that you see? I might just ask a couple of people. Let's see. Florina, are you there? Okay. Here we have some in the chat now. So we've got simple to use, 10 times faster, just faster. Good. So Cosmin, why did you choose faster as a value proposition and some of the others not?
So it's because I'm working on a product that, let's say, it provides security to investors that cannot sell their crowdfunding participations into investments. So the problem I'm trying to solve here is that people in certain platforms don't have the possibility to sell their investment. So by creating a marketplace for this kind of investments, you provide them the option to sell and regain the cash flow and security. And
Okay.
that's why I considered faster, not necessarily 10x faster.
Got it. Okay, well, I'll just do a little bit of a reveal. These are actually none of them are actually value propositions. They're actually features, functionalities, and technologies. Even 10x faster is a solution to some problem. In your case, faster, it sounds a lot more like actually being able to realize economic benefit for your portfolio, or being able to participate or get a better price than you would elsewhere. Those are more value propositions. Being faster in sort of the transactions is actually a solution. And a good way to test is your customers don't buy you simply because you're faster. They buy because they get some ultimate economic benefit out of it. Likewise, if you look at any of these, really, like we see like things like organic, fair trade certified, GMO free. They're all features of having a healthier lifestyle, okay, and looking after your family's health. So those are that. It's very, very tricky, but you've got to kind of look beyond sort of the features and say, what are the ultimate benefits that we're actually driving? And they're very, very powerful, because when you start talking in these terms instead, you're able to actually engage your customers in a very different way and think about prioritizing ultimately features based on the benefits that are going to deliver against those value propositions. And importantly, deprioritize things that do not do such a good job of that. So let's try that again. So which of these are value propositions? Type when you spot it, and good on you. Razvan, you win. Razvan has said all of them, all of the above. Correct. Now you'll notice some really interesting things happening here. You can probably start naming the actual products that these are value propositions for. That's because you're thinking in terms of the customer for their products. If I just said faster, 10x faster, or GMO free, you probably wouldn't recognize the product because they're features. But when I start saying helps you look 10 years younger, or lets you enjoy retirement early, or helps you stop smoking so you can live longer, you can probably start guessing at potential products that that's an actual value proposition for. Can anyone tell me, could you see you'll always be able to get a ride home? What kind of product might that be?
Uber, Bolt.
Yeah, exactly. Uber, Lyft, but it could also be like just it could also be a friend with a car. So yeah, public transport, exactly. And there's many different ways of solving these problems. So you're spot on, right? So that just gives you an idea of the difference between, you'll notice that one very important word appears pretty much through every single one of these, and that is the word you. In other words, I'm speaking on the terms of the product of the customer and what's important to them, what motivates them, and not in terms of my solution. Now, if you do get stuck, you can always look at all of your different features. I won't go into this detail, into this too much. And for every single feature, think, what is the benefit of that feature? And then can I build up ultimately to the value proposition? So this is an example of a home hydroponics unit for growing vegetables at home, and being able to kind of like, there's lots of different features for that, but ultimately it's about convenience and a healthy, sustainable life. So let's actually give it a shot and see if we can have some fun with this. We all know Airbnb, I assume. So imagine your Airbnb before it was even created. So in your head or on chat, list features that you would include in Airbnb's service. Let's see if we can actually just come up with a couple of ideas. So I'll give you one. So for example, I might want to be able to book a local house. Any other features? Pay by card. Good. See the location that you're going to stay on the map. Pick a place to stay with. A video preview. Excellent. Details of the host. Luggage drop off. Georgiana, you've definitely got a lot of requirements there. Interesting locations, cheap accommodation. Good, good. Now, their features. Their features. Can you come up with the 3 value propositions that Airbnb actually proposed to their investors before they even started? What were the 3 value propositions? Any ideas? It's easy to come up with features, harder to come up with the underlying value props. Your home away from home. Excellent. Now, a marketplace for owners and tourists is a solution. It's a marketplace. Marketplace is a solution. What do the owners and the tourists what are they trying to get out of it? Make money renting your unused space. That's excellent. Good. Excellent. So you'll actually see this is from the Airbnb original pitch deck. You'll see that they simply define the problem. This is their problem statement. Price is an important concern for customers. Hotels leave you disconnected from the city and its culture, and there's no easy way to book a room with a local or become a host. And they had these 3 value propositions. Simple. One was save money when traveling. One was make money when hosting. And the last one, which is a true differentiator, was share culture, a local connection to the city, which is very, very similar to your home away from home that Georgiana mentioned. Make money renting your unused space, Christian mentioned. That's definitely making money when hosting. They're value propositions. It's as simple as that. So when you're thinking about your products, making sure that you're talking in terms of those problems is paramount. All right, let's move on to number 3. How are your customers solving the problem today? So this is really about understanding how well or poorly they're being served. This allows you to identify how you might truly differentiate yourself in the market, or might give you clues about where you want to focus your efforts. So it's all about coming from their perspective about how poorly or how well they are served today, and figuring out how you can actually do a better job than what their current options are. As opposed to you coming from your point of view and saying, I want to build this product and have all these features, you can actually have a much more empathy-driven sort of approach. So you want to be thinking not in terms of direct competitors. It's important to think about your broad set of competitors, really just alternatives from the customer's point of view. They don't think Lyft and Uber, that's my only 2 choices. They're making a broader set of decisions. They're saying, I could walk, I could get public transport, I could get a friend to pick me up, right? So they're thinking much more broadly in terms of their alternatives, and so should you. Somehow your customer, because if you've identified a problem, somehow they're solving that today. They may not be solving it very well. They may not be solving it using technology. So you might be able to do a better job, but thinking about how they solve it today is critical. I'll give you an example. Now, on the left here, when I joined Masterclass was what we considered to be our competitors. The direct competitors, LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, Udemy, etc. Can anyone tell me what you think some of the alternatives are, those that solve the same problem, but maybe through different approaches might be?
YouTube.
YouTube, excellent. Any others? Just yell them out. Yeah, books, good. Schools, definitely schools, like traditional schools, right? Forums, yeah. These were some of the things that we actually found ourselves actually competing against. It's very easy when you're sort of kicking back, trying to find inspiration, turning on your TV, starting to watch Masterclass, and then switching to your latest Netflix program instead. Or if you're looking for inspiration, Pinterest does a really good job. It's a very different product, but you can come in and get inspiration behind all sorts of different things, cooking, decorating, any kind of creative arts, as well as traditional classes were definitely a very, very popular alternatives as well. So you've got YouTube, you've got books, you've got plenty of those, and a meetup group like ours. So it's important when you're doing this step that you're thinking about this in terms of learning more about your customer, and not thinking just about like feature parity or the different competitors and what they're doing better than you, and starting to chase after the competitors. They may be serving very different markets, or they may be focusing on very, very different differentiation factors to you. It's really about like learning about how my target customer solves the problem today. I find a lot of mistakes made here is to do some kind of feature parity like analysis. They have all these other features. If we're going to win in market, we've got to have all those features as well. And that's a big mistake. And then finally, in addition to looking at which solutions that they offer today, complement that with what's called a customer journey map. It's actually quite simple to do. I've done this with clients where we basically can do this in half a day, where you want to map out every step of the customer's journey today, not with your product, but with how they're solving the product today. And you look for these things. Now, there's a bit of an eye chart. There is a template online, again, that you can kind of go and get and use if you like. But essentially, there's some kind of scenario or trigger that requires them to solve a problem. Now, you can then imagine steps all the way through trying to solve that problem. This can be more of a traditional funnel. It can be just a set of steps that the customers need to take. Define kind of what the user is trying to do, what problem they're trying to solve at each step, and what they actually go and do. What are the different touch points? And then this is important, write down their emotional state. How happy are they today at each stage? And find out where the biggest like emotional pain points are. And then also write down like what's the underlying root causes for those different pain points. Now, we don't have time to go through in detail how to actually do one of these, but brainstorming each one of the steps and thinking about every step along the way that a customer would take and the kinds of actions they'll take, and then pinpointing where those biggest pain points are, gives you a lot of clue about where you should be focusing your actual problem solving. Okay. And then 4, question yourself, what is unique in your approach to solving your customer's problem? This is going to be how you're going to differentiate yourself. And this is probably where you want to spend most of your effort. It is important to make sure that it's truly unique, that it's not otherwise available to customers. Now, technically, yes, there's always space for multiple players within a market and everything like that. But you've got to be at least saying something about what is unique, what's your unique selling proposition, so you can truly be solving the problem for your customer in a unique way. They have to be sustainable. So I find that it's very easy for people to say, oh, we are the something solution, but we're easier to use or we're cheaper. The problem with both of those is that ease of use or a user experience is kind of easy to replicate. And so you can actually lose that differentiation factor very easily, very quickly. Likewise, cheaper is just inviting kind of a commoditization. Like, unless your cost structure is truly going to give you a sustainable advantage against others, you cannot maintain cheaper. So instead, look for things like, is there access to proprietary technology or infrastructure that others can't have? Or maybe you've been able to develop network effects that can't be easily replicated. Or maybe you've developed a one-stop shop with seamless integration that allows much greater convenience. Those are much more valuable differentiation factors, and they can't be trivial, too broad, nor too narrow, because too narrow is often the mistake that I see that's made, for example, around too narrow is having a solution, but then saying, oh, our differentiation is some kind of premium features that only appeal to like 5% of my audience. That's not a valuable a differentiation factor. Give you an example. What do you think Masterclass's differentiation factor is?
Expert practitioners.
Yeah, specifically.
Masters in their domain.
Yep. Yeah. These are all kind of celebrities, right? These are all the world's best known faces in their fields. And that's the differentiator. You can't kind of get that anywhere else. I mean, people have tried, but you can't really get that, certainly at scale, across so many different categories at anywhere else other than Masterclass. So anyone can solve the inspire creativity problem, which is what the core problem we're trying to solve. But only Masterclass is doing this by basically giving you an insight into the absolute masters in their spaces, worlds, and how they've been inspired. And that's the unique differentiator. It's very different. I'll give you another couple of examples. So we talked about Masterclass. Well, Masterclass is, great content, anywhere, anytime access, and learning from the best in the world. We also probably know Amazon. Amazon is the largest selection, lowest price, fastest, easy delivery. Out of those three, which do you think Amazon's differentiation is?
Selection.
Fastest, easiest delivery, I think.
I think that's correct. So theoretically, largest selection, yes, Amazon does a much better job, but you can get a good selection across many different providers. And lowest price, well, yes and no. They're generally low price, but they're not always like the lowest price. Really what they've done is invested in a way that no one else can really beat today in making sure that you can actually have the fastest, easiest delivery. And that was a problem, or that was a differentiation that wasn't well solved. If you remember, early e-commerce was very much like you could buy, you could get a good price, but you then have to pay for shipping, wait for days, it would arrive, sometimes unreliably. So basically, they've spent a lot of their effort in really differentiating themselves on the fastest, easiest possible delivery, to the point where I ordered something from Amazon yesterday and it's already arrived. And it was like that. They've gone and invested in warehouse configuration so they can optimize for fastest, easy and delivery. For example, they don't put inventory like in one spot of the same product, which you would imagine would be easiest to manage a warehouse that way. What they've done is they've gone and created bins and they've put items that are frequently ordered together in those bins together in sometimes weird combinations. A lot of data science has gone into figuring out the optimal mix so they can actually package and ship as quickly as possible. Now, one of my other favorite examples is called the Impossible Burger. This is a vegetarian burger meat alternative. And they've done an amazing job of driving down the cost of their product while maintaining quality. So much so that now the product competes pretty effectively in fast food joints with your typical burger. So they're really going for making this an affordable, accessible choice. They're also looking at making sure that it has the nutritional value that meat has. But I could argue that there are plenty of vegetarian choices out there that do both of those things. Some of them aren't so tasty, but they definitely achieve those two goals. What they've gone and done to differentiate themselves is to really focus on that third one, uncompromisingly delicious and performs in the kitchen. They have labs where they go and actually invest in trying to get the taste and the smell just right. They've spent as much time on the actual content of the product, a meat alternative, on their texture and the color. And they've also put heme proteins into the product to make sure that it kind of like has that red, juicy kind of feel as you're cooking it, and the sizzle. So they've really looked at the whole science behind what makes meat so delicious and tried to replicate that in a way that actually makes you feel like you're cooking meat. It gives you the same kind of emotional experience. And that's how they've really differentiated themselves. Right. And we're in the home stretch here. So what don't you know yet about addressing your customer's problem is the last one. And this is really about starting down the journey with design thinking in a more iterative way. My criticism with this sort of double diamond is it looks like it's a linear process, and it's not. Understanding your customer takes years of sort of going over and defining assumptions and testing those assumptions and iterating your understanding and spending more time with them and empathizing with them. And so it's important to kind of like call out what are your risks and assumptions that you kind of need to test, evaluate, and mitigate. A good case in point is I talked about building a quick and dirty persona, something that you can do in like, or a customer journey in like under a couple of hours. The problem is it's really just a hypothesis. You don't know it to be true. And you got to do more research and go and test that. So it's important to kind of capture the different risks that you need to address your customer's problem. Focusing on those that are not readily in your control, the things that might be executional risks, like we might not be able to get an engineering team to build our solution is not what I'm talking about. There might be an assumption we're making about our customers' choices that turns out to be wrong. Maybe there are other solutions out there, or maybe they're not prepared to pay for it. So those are choices you need to make. When you start actually getting into the kind of more validation stage, you want a list of hypotheses or risks that actually says these are the things that we need to actually evaluate first and understand how to learn from those. And then what you're doing is you're actually on a journey of iteration here. You're not one time going to do customer discovery and then say we have the perfect solution. You've got to be constantly kind of coming back to evaluate and test it. And this is a very difficult because it's kind of time consuming and not necessarily perceived to be of high value. But what's more costly is launching a product that fails. So final example, here's an actual example of risks in the order that Masterclass needed to eliminate to build their product. Will consumers be interested in classes taught by celebrities? What do you think the very, very, very first prototype version of Masterclass was? Just to test this hypothesis. Any ideas? One class? Almost. That was actually they actually didn't do any classes at this stage. Good guess, Cheetah. Any others? Yeah, Stragos is pretty correct. So they basically did one or two celebrities on the web, and then asked consumers. They then did some advertising and asked consumers to vote on which celebrities they would like to learn from, and that was basically it. And from there, they actually got a pretty good signal on their responsiveness from the advertising, and then the interest on specific topics and areas, and even kind of got like kind of a good signal that the consumer would actually be interested indeed being taught by celebrities, and so forth. Can we charge enough to make the business sustainable? Built one class and tried to see whether or not we could sell it. Will instructors agree to teach? Importantly, will instructors be any good at teaching? So the only way we could do that is actually try to actually get them to teach, but also take a very, very close role in sort of developing the curriculum and making sure that that was going to work. Very tough was, will instructors be able to commit to timelines and schedules? Turns out they don't like doing that at all. So there had to be a core competency built at Masterclass of being able to basically film a more than feature length kind of documentary, like 5 hours, and get that done in 2 to 3 days. That's a really tough order, but it was important to be able to actually become exceptionally good at that, because instructors did not want to volunteer much time, and so forth. And you'd argue that they're right at the end now and probably the market leader, and as a result have built a very successful company. Now, for your product, writing down your assumptions and your risks just helps you identify where you need to be focusing more research, more discovery, more prototyping before you build your entire solution. And that's what I'd love you to do. Okay, and that is pretty much it for content today. Here's the 5 key questions again. And I would love to invite any discussion or Q&A.
So drop it down in the chat, or you can even ask directly, take the mic if you want to, if you feel more comfortable like that. Go ahead. And while you're thinking, maybe I have a question for Ken. How do you manage, I mean, if you have your users outside of the company, but you may have users inside of your company, like your sponsors, people who pay for the product, especially in the early stages of development, how do you manage the sponsor energy or let's say availability to continuously fund your iterations, especially in the prototyping phase or even in the discovery phase? So how do you convince them to keep investing while there is no product? There may be no product at that point.
Well, that therein lies part of the problem, Droga. So it's a mistake to not be building something and constantly kind of showing iterations of that product. Building and building and building something without actually kind of having anything that you can show. Biggest mistake is sort of creating kind of thinking of it from a technology perspective. Oh, I need to build this first, then this database, then this interface, and this service, and then I can actually build my product. You actually want to take slices and build the prototype first, build the user interface first, get the design out there, and then that will excite your stakeholder very much in terms of seeing that progress, and it also allow you to do and negotiate more time for that discovery and validation. I think that's fundamentally the issue. If obviously your internal stakeholder needs to be excited by things, I find that they're excited by progressive delivery of and iterations more so than say a status update on where you are with a project plan, which also means that it empowers you to do more discovery and validation with actual customers as well. My final thing I'm going to say is that it's important to kind of like talk about the cost of failure and what you're doing to reduce that potential risk. And by spending time evaluating and coming back and making sure that what you're building is the right thing. Now, I'm not saying you do that like and not build. I'm saying you build and do that at the same time, by actually showing the stakeholder that you're building confidence in your knowledge that this is going to be a successful product is usually the way to get them excited, because the impact of failure is big. Just so you know, something like 60 to 80% of products fail. You know, in other words, that they don't quite meet their targets. They don't fail outright necessarily, but they just don't meet the goals that were set out. We have a question.
It's still me there, but...
Oh, what are the roles in the product team that you must have to ensure you're building the right thing? So first of all, we talk about the triad of design, engineering or technical lead, and sort of product manager. It's very important to have those roles represented and being seen to be equal partners, because it's very easy to make a lot of technical trade-offs, for example, because it's easier to build, and make huge trade-offs on, say, the user interface, particularly, you know, I'm assuming for products that have a user interface. It's also very easy to over kind of design like a high fidelity kind of product too early. It's a common thing I see product teams fall into that trap, where they kind of get lost in the creativity and the beauty of their own product, and they forget to actually validate it. The overlooked role is actually data analytics. And there's quantitative and qualitative data analytics. So it's sort of, part of it might be sort of more user research, but subjective, qualitative, empathetic, kind of like interviewing and sort of getting good at that is an important function within the team. So that might be part of your role or part of UX's role, as well as actually having somebody who can help inform the decisions you're making with actual quantitative data. And that is the biggest gap I see. Just across most teams, they literally just don't get the support they need in terms of data that you have, or don't even think to instrument their products in a way that they can measure whether or not they're being successful. Cool. There's no other questions. Yeah, go ahead, Christian. Yeah, no problem. Thank you for your attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you for teaching us. Okay, bye.
If there's no other questions, I think we can wrap up. Oh, here we are. Was it the entire team who would be involved in the discovery phase to just design product, and would dev be into? Yes, it's absolutely essential to include your development team in the discovery phase, usually because, well, for two main reasons. The first is context. If you go and find a whole lot of information out about your target market and try to bring that back into the team and say, hey, this is what I've learned, you're being very prescriptive and you're kind of leaving the development team behind. They haven't had that same kind of experience understanding and empathizing with the customer. And so I find that those teams will be very detached. It won't feel very real. They won't necessarily feel a sense of strong desire to solve their customers' problems. They won't know how their work's fitting into the business objectives. So you've got to involve them early on. The second reason is that engineers are actually pretty close to how the solution is going to actually be built. They can imagine things that you probably can't. They can imagine ways of like getting the technology to do things that you probably aren't even asking for. So having having your developer leads involved in that they're likely to come back with better solutions than you could have even imagined. So you've got to negotiate getting their time to get involved with the discovery effort, and making sure that you're not just simply building, say, a pretty prototype that you can put in front of customers as just a design, because the dev team will not necessarily be able to build that.
A follow-on question to that was just an addendum.
Yeah, so good stakeholder management requires, I think, some level of involvement of the sponsors throughout. Do they need to be in the room with the discovery? Yes, absolutely. If they're exhibiting any kind of like behavior where it's like, oh, we already know the answer, let's just hurry up and get this built. Or yes, you can do discovery, but like you've got to hit this deadline. If you're getting kind of those sorts of conversations, if you can get them into the room, or at least seeing some of the discovery, or you start feeding them some of the results of this discovery efforts, you can start convincing them that it's a very, very valuable activity, particularly if you find a decision that you would have taken that actually goes in a different direction because of that, because of the discovery work. You can kind of sell them on the value of doing it. But yes, having the sponsors in the discovery phase, probably less so like for the whole journey, but certainly as recipients of kind of your key learnings and insights. And so it is absolutely up to you as either a designer or a product lead to go back to the sponsor with clarity of what you've learned, how that's driving your decision making, what are some of the key insights, and how that potentially is changing the product. Great.
I'm coming back with more.
So
I know this is a problem with some companies here in Romania. They get requirements scripted from like someone outside, and then they need to just execute.
Yeah.
How can you push on back on that?
Yeah. So this is very, very common. Do all those products go on to be hugely successful? Do all those products build exactly the right amount of features and functionality? Do you not, do you rarely end up in conversations where late in the piece, people are saying, oh, we're going to cut scope just to hit the timeline? Well, my question would be, well, why was that scope even in scope at the beginning? So I think it's just about like constantly just showing that they're going to get better ROI if you don't just land on a bunch of requirements that have been kind of dreamt up, because you won't overinvest, and you'll have a higher chance that the product you're building, you have a higher confidence level that you are going to ultimately build something that's valuable. And so this is less about like negotiating some time for user discovery as if it's like an extra activity. It's about showing the disasters that happen when you don't. I bet you if you were to draw upon some product releases, something of your product is not being adopted by your customers or not being sold. There's some features. I had a really great case recently where I just asked them to come back with percentage of adoption of every feature that they had built in the last year. And some of them were 2% of their customers were actually even using the product. That sort of data is very powerful, because literally that is 80% of what you build could have been potentially avoided. Even if you halved that, no one's perfect, right? You're going to still make mistakes. But if you halve that, then all of that investment could have been to something else. It's about shifting the conversation, not just from deadlines and cost to opportunity cost. What if we did something else instead? What if we knew that we were doing the right thing? What's the cost of not doing the right thing? And then there's the motivational element as well. No one likes putting things out into the world that don't get used. So let's figure out how to actually increase our chances of doing that and keep and motivate our engineering and design team rather than have them quit because we keep on putting things out that are prescribed to them. And then, finally, it coming down to talking about the elegance and the simplicity of fewer features and doing a few things really well. No one loves a super cluttered interface with all of these different features. They kind of, users much prefer a well-lit path to solve a few problems very, very well, and not a lot of like advanced features that they rarely use. And that's not true for every single product, but generally you don't, a cluttered interface is poor user experience. And that's often a result of not making tough decisions about what to actually include and what not to include. And how else are you going to inform that other than talk to your users? So there's 3 or 4 things right there, hopefully, that you can use.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to build something on top of the question Dragos asked. Romania is a big destination for outsourcing, like most Eastern European countries are. And these people are really good in engineering stuff, but they're not good in the exploration empathy part. So the one question that we get asked most often is, our customers are mostly B2B. How do we get to talk with the end user? They're paying the money. They have the timeline. They have the push to for go to market. They already have most of the requirements, and we're only here to push out code. So how do we help these people talk with their end user? How do we help them get this conversation started?
So, I mean, maybe this is a bit of an unsatisfying answer, but having been a frequent user of outsourced companies, I have personally found much greater success when I treat those teams as an extension of my team and requiring the same level of context setting, team building, empathy building, understanding the problem that they're trying to solve. And for the simple reason that they're very smart people. And if I explain what the problem is that I'm trying to solve and they understand enough about the context of the customer, they're probably going to come up with a better solution. Yes, I need to increase the level of my communication. Yes, I need to increase the level of my documentation, but that doesn't mean I need to or should default to simply a list of requirements. So unsatisfyingly, you need your customers to change. They need to realize the value of actually engaging you in a very different way and see the benefits of that. So I would probably ask that you figure out some case studies to show when you engage in this way. Another way could just be how you set up your engagements. So part of, you've got the tool of design thinking. Can you leverage that? Say, hey, this is our process. This is the way we like to do things. See if you can get some customers who are more open to trying things in a new way, saying, hey, we're going to actually go through this process rather than simply take a kind of RFP and say we're going to build it for you. And our commitment to you is that we're going to end up with a better product at the end of that, and see how it goes. But that's a hard thing to do because you're more of the recipient of kind of a flawed way of thinking as opposed to that. But I've definitely worked with companies, Argentina, Uruguay, Hungary. When we take that, these are an extension of the team and they need the same level of like context setting. Frankly, everyone has more fun. And they build better product. It's just true. I think I would ask you how can you influence your customers to try something a little bit different? Because I've seen it work, and I know that you intuitively can believe that it can work. How do you get that industry to change at your end?
I believe Georgiana had something to say just before you started.
You spotted me. Yeah, well, I was actually thinking, so besides what you guys mentioned, like what Ken mentioned, I was thinking that from my perspective, being like a business person and on the commercial side of things, I think that this would be the job of the salesperson to actually provide that liaison between the team that actually builds a product and the sponsors or the shareholders, right? So from my perspective, I think that also with the case studies, but who else can actually provide better understanding on some projects that you've been working on already than your salesperson? So I think that, I don't know, in these teams, like if we talk about Agile and Scrum and so on, I think that there's always a commercial person that needs to be that influencer, let's just say, to help with the connections, if it makes sense.
Yeah, and part of that's going to come down to how do you put the right incentives in place? Because if their incentives is to sign a deal and commit to a whole list of a laundry list of prescriptive requirements, they're going to do that unless you kind of change how they're necessarily rewarded. Great. Well, I hope today at least gave you a bit of an idea of unpacking that define stage in design thinking, a little bit more about like how to capture a deeper understanding of your target customer, encapsulating them, talking about the benefits that they're looking for, and that your solution will potentially solve for, and ultimately where you fit in and how you're going to solve the most painful needs. And then ultimately knowing that you're making a bunch of assumptions. And so this is constantly having to iterate. That is sort of the central message of all of this is it takes work to really like deeply understand your customer, but it doesn't require like a lot of upfront effort. It's more just making it part of your everyday. Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was really, really engaging, Ken.
Thank you.
I appreciate, and I will Google you to search for more about you. Yes, yes. I confess, I will Google you. Thank you. Really engaging and interesting. I hope to see you again on the second conference.
Thank you, Adriana. I really appreciate that. I will just quickly share this in case you're interested. So this is the best way to keep in touch. So you can get a book that there's a couple of local suppliers. Douglas, if you don't mind actually dropping a link, I've also put that in the email. We're going to send an email out. You've got a copy of all these slides, and there's more things you can kind of read through, but the book goes into more detail. So it'd be great if you were to pick up a copy. Use that link, just I think links to Amazon in Germany. Influentialpm.com is the website. There's more talks like this, as well as some resources and templates that you're welcome to kind of use. Please connect to me on LinkedIn. There's no, that would be great. It might take me a little while to reply, but do connect on LinkedIn, and that way we can definitely stay in touch. And if you have any specific questions, always happy to get an email from people that have been in one of these talks. Great.
Very nice. Thank you.
No worries. And on that note, I'll bid you farewell.
Thank you, Ken. Really glad having you here. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye
Thank
all.
you for the opportunity.
For a nice meeting.
Thank you, Ken. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. All the best.
Mulțumim tuturor. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao,
Seară bună,
salut,
Ciao,
seară
seară
bună.
faină.
Da.
Calispera, hai.
Mulțumesc.
Să fie.